My STBXW filed for a divorce 8 months ago. We have been separated for 8 months and moved in with her affair partner. Divorce is to be finalized next month. Now, she's begging not to go through with it and begging me to try reconciliation. My wife, 38 years old, and I, 37 years old, met in college. Before getting married, we dated for 5 years. Our marriage has been stable, with a few ups and downs. We have 2 children, ages 13 and 15. In January of last year, I observed my wife spending more time than usual on the phone. She essentially did what every other cheater does. When I attempted to communicate my concerns, they lied, shifted responsibility, and gaslighted me. I know I wasn't perfect, and I made mistakes that I deeply regret, but she treated me like a piece of all during her affair. I attempted to fix all elements of our connection that she believed were lacking. When D-Day arrived in early June, she admitted to having an EA and sleeping with him just twice. Then she accused me of being the cause of her affair. She said that she wanted to reconcile, and we attempted reconciliation, but she was just not interested. She continued to contact him, and they continued to converse. When I expressed my discomfort, she maintained they were just friends and continued to delete messages even after I warned her not to. When I threatened divorce, she cried, apologized, and begged me not to. When I brought up the affair, she became enraged, and I was the one who ended up apologizing. After about 2 or 3 months, she began to vanish again, claiming that she was visiting relatives who needed her at the time. I had a feeling she was going to see AP, and when I mentioned it to her, she was extremely persuasive. She went missing one weekend and didn't answer my calls or texts, and when she returned, she informed me that her cousin had fallen ill and they had to transport her to the hospital, and she had left her phone at her sister's house, and I was trying to make it work for us the whole time. She observed all of my efforts but didn't give a damn. Then, by mid-December, she informed me she was leaving, that she was unhappy in our relationship, and that, although she still loved me, she was in love with AP. She had finally met her soulmate. I recall sobbing for hours trying to persuade her, but she was set in her ways. We had to inform the children. Because her AP apartment was tiny, she suggested I could take the kids during the week, and she could come see them on weekends. A week later, she filed for divorce. This was the most difficult time of my life, and I cried for weeks. When I attempted to speak to her, all she said was that she was sorry for all she had put me through, but her mind was already set. Except for us, no one else was aware of what was going on. They were both aware that we had simply been separated, but they had no clue why we had been separated. When her mother called at the end of January and insisted that I tell the truth, I had already invited her and her father to my house. On my mother-in-law's shoulder, I sobbed almost to the point of tears as I told them what I had learned. They offered me consolation and expressed regret for their daughter's irresponsible behavior. I then contacted my parents and a few close acquaintances, and before long, everyone was aware of our existence, and I started receiving comforting messages from others who were discussing my ex-boyfriend. A few times later, my wife called me and broke down in tears, telling me that I had turned everyone against her and that she despises me. In addition, she claims that persons have threatened her and AP, that her father despises her, they had a nice relationship, and that her sisters have refused to engage in conversation with her. No one will engage in conversation with her without offending her. It was the middle of April at the time. By the beginning of June, her relationship with AP had deteriorated as a result of the stress she was experiencing. In one of her visits to the kids, she informed me that her AP had kicked her out because he couldn't handle the stress of their relationship. She was staying in a hotel room at the time of this conversation. The look of someone who was depressed was not there in her. When she inquired as to whether she could move back in, I responded in the negative. She conveyed her appreciation, but asked for more time with the children to be spent with them. After expressing regret for having missed the children's activities, she said that she would come back in the afternoon to cook for them and spend time with them. I was in agreement. As soon as I arrived home from work, she would be there to cook my favorite supper, clean the house, and leave little notes with flowers saying I love you. She would always make an effort to spend extra time with me when I got home from work. I have to admit that it was a pleasure to spend time with her. Her next words were about how much she misses me and whether or not I actually want a separation from my husband. These were the kind of conversations I avoided at all costs. She contacted me last week to say that she had been attending IC and wondered if we might try MC instead of IC. She's begun dressed like that and wearing makeup, and she's trying to initiate with me, but I've turned her down each time she's attempted to do so. She has gone out and bought extra stuff for me, and she has mentioned MC on a number of occasions. She sobbed throughout the weekend, pleading with me not to continue with the divorce. She said that she has already endured a great deal, and that all she wants is for me and her family to be together again, and that she would do everything I ask. It's almost as if the roles have been reversed in this situation. Despite the fact that I felt numb for the whole time, there's a part of me that's happy that she's received a taste of her own medicine. Despite the fact that I still love her, I'm unsure whether or not I should try to restart our relationship. Story 2. My wife female/28 cheated on me. In addition to 3 years of marriage to my wife Kirsten, a 28-year-old woman, we have been together since she was a freshman in college. 2 years ago, we welcomed our first child into the world, and our relationship has been on the rocks ever since. I work around 60 hours per week to provide for our family, while she is a stay-at-home mother who also takes on occasional yoga teaching gigs to supplement our income. Everything changed for her roughly 6 months after giving child when she met a photographer in her yoga class, which altered everything. Kirsten was encouraged to pose for a boudoir portrait by Jane, the photographer, in order to increase her self-esteem and confidence. I had no problems to this since I wanted to be of assistance to her because she was still suffering from postpartum depression at the time of our conversation. The photographic session went well, and she seemed to be experiencing genuine happiness for the first time in a long time. After a few months, she said she got an offer from Jane to participate in a yoga highlight video shoot, and she even obtained a free plane ticket and hotel reservation to the beach where they were shooting. Even though I was upset that I couldn't travel with her, I was relieved that she got some time away from me and our child. She returned a few days later, rejuvenated, and exclaimed about how much she had enjoyed herself. Jane ultimately provided numerous instances, all of which were outstanding. Nevertheless, some of them had nudity that was just implied rather than shown. This is the point at when everything went awry. Because I was intrigued, I decided to dig into Janie's photography company. It turned out that Jane was a male photographer, as I had suspected. I'm not sure why, but I've always assumed Jane was a woman despite the fact that I've never met her. Something didn't seem quite right, particularly given the fact that Kirsten had never addressed it, so I took a closer look. I still have nightmares about what happened next. Jane, in addition to being a photographer, had a profile on a fetish website, which was ingeniously hidden and only found by descending into the rabbit hole. When I went to his profile and saw images of Kirsten on his photo stream, my heart sank. However, her face was obscured, so I couldn't see her. My suspicions were confirmed when I saw her attire from not just the most recent photo shoot, but also from a boudoir session she did earlier in the year, as well as a tattoo she had on her lower back. Every action, including oral performance and reception, as well as penetration, was documented in the images taken. I had the need to throw up. The fact that I used to be athletic, but now that I work 60 hours a week, I've acquired some weight is particularly painful. Jane, in the meanwhile, is this muscular, interesting personality with a member twice my size, and I realize that is what Kirsten is looking for, rather than the same old boring me. In spite of the fact that it occurred more than a year ago, I haven't addressed the situation with her yet. For the sake of our kid, I'm afraid of breaking up with my husband. So I'm effectively left with the knowledge that while she's in class or when I'm at work, she may be doing yoga or Jane or something like